The Labour leader Ed Miliband could be weeks away from becoming Prime Minister, but he might need to rely on the support of the SNP in the Commons to get to number 10.
In its election manifesto, the Labour Party has already promised it will cut the deficit every year, and this morning he's outlining plans to invest an extra £2.5 billion in the NHS in England.
And that would be paid for by introducing a so-called mansion tax on properties worth more than £2 million and a new levy on tobacco. Mr Miliband's with us now. Good morning.
Good to be with you.
So you're going to outline plans to get 1,000 more training places for nurses in England if you get into number 10. Isn't what the NHS needs right now, though, not more training places, but more money right now?
And that's going to happen. And you're absolutely right, Bill. And that's why our plan that we're setting out today is a plan for the first 100 days. We're going to have a budget within the first months of a Labour government. It's going to put in place the mansion tax, the tobacco levy, and the clampdown on tax avoidance by the hedge funds to get the money flowing into our NHS straight away. And on day one of a Labour government, we'll be writing to the organisations that train the nurses, so you'll have 1,000 extra places, and that's part of our commitment to have 20,000 more nurses in the NHS.
Right. The experts all say that the NHS has got a shortfall of £8 billion. That's the amount of money that needs pouring into this big black hole. Labour's only pledged £2.5 billion so far, and Ed Balls on the sofa, sitting where you are last week, was very vague about where the rest of the money would come from.
Well, let me be very specific about it. Look, I've got an iron rule, Bill, which is that I only make commitments where I know where the money is coming from. So Labour has an immediate plan for 2015, a rescue plan. The Conservatives and other parties have an IOU for the NHS for 2020. I think what the NHS needs is money now. And that's what we're going to provide. Now, this is a down payment, but I'm not going to make promises when I don't know where the money's coming from, because there's nothing more dangerous for the NHS than making a promise when you don't know where a penny of it's coming from.
Right, so in essence, and your honesty may be quite laudable in this respect, you're going to pay £2.5 billion now, but what you're saying is we don't know where the rest of the money is going to come from. You're also saying we don't know if we'll actually have that money.
No, what I'm saying is the NHS will always be a priority for the Labour Party. And people can trust us because they know that over the years in government we've always invested in the NHS. But, you know, there is a big contrast now at this election. You've got the Conservative Party that is spraying around commitments on the NHS, on tax cuts, on housing, and they don't know where a penny of it's coming from. I'm not going to do that. I think that the trust in politics is too fragile to do that. I think people want to know when we're making promises, we know where the money's coming from. So this is a down payment, but it's clear where the money's coming from.
Right, and part of it's coming from the mansion tax. You will probably have to pay that mansion tax, won't you?
I will, yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I feel fine. I'll tell you why. Because I think that actually there's a big contrast in this election between David Cameron, who wants to cut taxes for people who are better off in our society, and me, who thinks that people like me should pay a little bit more to fund our NHS. And it goes to the big argument of this election, which is, do we run the country thinking as long as the richest and most powerful are okay, the wealth will trickle down to everybody else, or do we put working people first again in our country? And you know, I'm not going to sacrifice our NHS. I'm going to do what our NHS needs. And one of the things it needs is a mansion tax on the most expensive properties to help get those doctors and nurses and other people into our NHS.
You've criticised the Prime Minister repeatedly for, you've said in past, he's a PR man for the rich. Is there something wrong with being wealthy in Britain today?
No, I just think that people who are better off should pay their fair share. You know, take this issue of tax avoidance. You know, there's this non-dom rule, you may know about it and your viewers may know about it, which means you can live here, work here, be permanently settled here and not pay taxes here. And that's been in place for 200 years. And I'm the first leader to actually call time on that and say we're going to abolish the non-dom rule. So, you know, I think it's about paying your fair share. I think it's about making sure we clamp down on tax avoidance. And that is part of having a proper deficit plan to actually pay down the deficit every year and balance the books.
As things stand, the pollsters say you're the man most likely to be the next Prime Minister, with the way that the seats work out and the arithmetic of the House of Commons, if you like. At the same time that Labour has lost its heartland in Scotland, has made no gains on the Tories since 2010, is losing votes to the Greens and UKIP, it wouldn't exactly be a healthy mandate, would it?
Well, let's see what happens at the election. You know, what I see is actually people hearing Labour's message about how we're going to reward hard work again and raise the minimum wage, cut the tuition fee from £9,000 to £6,000, take action on the energy companies and rescue an NHS that is going backwards under this government. You know, longer waiting in A&E, longer waiting for your test results, longer waiting to get an operation.
More nurses since they were in 2010? More nurses since they were in 2010?
Well, let's have that discussion, and viewers at home will make their decision about whether they think the NHS has gone backwards. What I see is an NHS where people are waiting, 50% more people, you know, waited more than 4 hours in A&E this year than last year. Half of nurses say wards are dangerously understaffed. Now, I think we've got to take action. And, you know, I really fear for what will happen to the NHS under David Cameron. He wants to double the spending cuts next year. I think that is really dangerous for our NHS.
There's been a lot of talk about what Labour would do with the SNP to reach some kind of agreement or not to reach an agreement after the election. You said there'll be no deals. At the same time, other voices in Labour have said, well, we'd have to, you know, we'd talk to all the parties about how we'd get the votes together. What are you going to do? Let's be absolutely clear right now about it.
I couldn't be clearer about it, Bill. There's no coalition with the SNP. You know, Labour will put forward...
No coalition, that's good. That's clear. I mean, but no deals?
No, look, Labour will put forward its Queen's speech after the election. How other parties vote on a Queen's speech will be a matter for them. But I do want to say something wider. You know, I think David Cameron is playing fast and loose with the United Kingdom. You know, this is somebody who has now given up hope of winning a majority. He simply wants to he's actually trying to boost the SNP. We've now got to a situation where he's trying to, and you know,
never mind what David Cameron says. Let's hear what you have to say, because you may not have a coalition, but you could still have a working arrangement, couldn't you?
Look, but I'm not going to go through every hypothetical.
But
I want to be clear about this.
This is a really important point, because we've been through this several times before over the past couple of weeks. People who are thinking of which way to vote need to know,
and I'll tell them, a Labour government led by me, what happens in that Labour government will be decided by me, not by the SNP. I couldn't be clearer. I do want to make this point, though. You've got Michael Forsyth, who's a former minister in John Major's government, a Tory minister, saying that David Cameron is playing short-term and dangerous games threatening the integrity of the United Kingdom. I want to make this point. Look, setting England against Scotland, David Cameron coming along talking up a nationalist party. He shouldn't be talking up a nationalist party in order to try and get them to do well in Scotland, to take votes off Labour, to try and crawl back into Downing Street. He should be taking on a nationalist party, as I'm doing. I say there are fundamental disagreements between me and the SNP. They want a second referendum on independence, Bill, in the next 5 years. I'm not having that. So I think David Cameron is now threatening the integrity of the United Kingdom with the games he is playing, and I think Conservatives are now ashamed of what he's doing.
One last question on foreign affairs. You'll have seen the terrible things happening in the Mediterranean with migrants trying to reach Europe from North Africa. Has the EU got it right? What should we be doing on an international basis to stop this?
Well, I think these are horrible scenes, appalling scenes, and of course the traffickers are reprehensible people, but if people are drowning, you don't let them drown. And I don't think the EU is doing enough. I think we need to get these search and rescue operations, which were cancelled last November, properly back up to the levels they were at. We can't let people drown, and you know, this is a stain.
The argument goes that then that just encourages more people to make the attempt.
I know, but first of all, I don't buy it. And secondly, we haven't really got to a situation, have we, where we say we're going to let people drown because saving them is somehow a price kind of not worth paying. I mean, we cannot do that. I mean, frankly, it's a stain on the EU if we don't take proper action.
All right, Ed Miliband, thanks very much.
Thank you.